A rancher lived alone for years, until a naked woman appeared crying on his fence. Tom Bennett lived alone on his ranch for as long as he could remember. Years of isolation had shaped him into a man of habits, of routine, and of quiet reflection. His small home, made of weathered wood and stone, stood on a hill overlooking endless stretches of golden grass, where the wind whispered secrets only he seemed to hear. To outsiders, his life might have seemed lonely, empty, or even sad. But Tom had learned to find comfort in the rhythm of his work and the silent companionship of his animals. Each morning, long before the sun rose over the horizon, Tom would wake to the crowing of a distant rooster and the gentle rustle of the grass. He poured himself a cup of strong coffee and sat on his porch, listening to the world slowly wake. The air was always crisp and clean, carrying the faint smell of earth and hay. It was a smell he loved, one that reminded him of his father who had taught him everything he knew about ranching. After breakfast, Tom would begin his daily chores. The work was hard, often exhausting, but it gave him a sense of purpose. He checked fences for broken boards or loose wires, tended to the cattle, and ensured the horses were fed and healthy. He mended saddles, sharpened tools, and sometimes repaired parts of his house when a storm had battered the old roof. His hands were rough and calloused from years of labor, but they were steady, capable hands. Despite the constant work, Tom often felt the quiet pull of loneliness. He had no family nearby, and the few friends he had were miles away, living in towns that felt distant and unfamiliar. The silence of the land was sometimes comforting, yet at other times it pressed in on him. On long afternoons, when the sun was high and the ranch seemed still, he would find himself thinking about the life he might have had if he had chosen differently, if he had married, had children, or lived among people. But those thoughts never lingered long. He had chosen this life, and he took pride in it. Tom's neighbors were few and far between, mostly other ranchers who respected his independence. He knew their faces, their routines, and their stories, but interactions were rare. A nod across a dusty road or a brief wave during a market visit was usually all that passed between them. He preferred it this way. Life on the ranch required focus, patience, and self-reliance, qualities that had been tested many times over the years. Evenings were Tom's favorite time of day. He would sit by the fireplace in his modest living room, sipping tea and listening to the soft crackle of the flames. Sometimes he read old books his father had left behind, novels and biographies that told stories of adventure, courage, and resilience. Other times he simply stared into the fire, thinking about the land and the animals that relied on him. The sky, turning shades of orange and pink, reminded him that each day had a beginning and an end, and that life, even in isolation, carried its own rhythm and beauty. Animals were his closest companions. His dog Max was always at his side, following him from the barn to the fields, keeping watch with keen eyes and a loyal heart. The horses, strong and patient, had personalities that Tom understood as clearly as he understood his own. There was Daisy, a gentle mare who loved to nuzzle his hand, and Thunder, a proud stallion who responded to his voice alone. Caring for them was more than work. It was a partnership, a connection that filled the empty spaces in his life. Tom also had a small vegetable garden near the back of his house. He grew tomatoes, peppers, and a few herbs, tending them carefully throughout the year. Gardening gave him a sense of accomplishment and a touch of variety in his otherwise routine life. On rare occasions, he would cook a simple meal using fresh produce and meat from the ranch, savoring flavors that were wholesome and unhurried. Though he was mostly content, Tom carried memories with him, memories of family, friends, and times when life had been more crowded and lively. Sometimes at night, he would think about the laughter that had once filled his childhood home, or the lessons his father had taught him about courage, honesty, and hard work. These memories were bittersweet, gentle reminders of the world beyond the fence and the quiet life he had chosen for himself. The land itself had stories to tell. Tom knew every hill, every stream, and every hidden patch of wildflowers. He knew where the deer came to drink, where coyotes wandered at night, and where the wind carried seeds from one end of the ranch to the other. The seasons dictated the pace of life. Spring brought new growth and the birth of calves. Summer tested the endurance of both man and animals. Autumn painted the landscape in golden hues, and winter reminded everyone of the harshness and beauty of survival. Tom welcomed each season, embracing the lessons it brought. Sometimes the silence was broken by unexpected visitors, a lost traveler, a neighboring rancher needing advice, or a wandering bird with a song that carried across the fields. These moments, rare and brief, reminded Tom that he was part of a larger world, even if he chose to live at its edges. But more often than not, the ranch was quiet. The wind, the rustling grass, the distant mountains, they were his constant companions. Despite the peace of his routine, there was a part of Tom that longed for connection, for a story to unfold beyond the boundaries of his land. He didn't know it yet, but life had a way of surprising even the most steady of men. One ordinary afternoon, as he walked along the edge of his property, inspecting a section of fence that had begun to sag, he felt a shift in the air. Something was different. A sound, faint but unmistakable, reached his ears, a soft, distressed cry that did not belong to any animal he knew. Tom paused, squinting across the field. At first he thought it might be the wind or a coyote in the distance, but the sound persisted. His heart quickened, and he started moving cautiously toward it, hands brushing against the tall grass. The cry grew louder, more urgent. As he approached the fence that marked the edge of his property, he saw something that would change the quiet rhythm of his life forever. A woman, sitting and crying, her figure small and vulnerable against the vast openness of the land. For a moment, Tom froze. The sight was shocking, unfamiliar, and completely outside the bounds of his normal life. But instinct kicked in. He approached slowly, making sure not to startle her, and called out softly, "Are you okay?" "Can I help?" The woman looked up, her eyes red from crying, her expression a mix of fear and confusion. She did not answer immediately, but the trust in her gaze was faintly there, a fragile thread connecting them across the empty field. Tom reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a blanket he carried for emergencies. "Here, take this," he said gently, wrapping it around her shoulders. She shivered and clutched it, and for the first time, Tom felt the depth of another person's pain, the rawness of fear and loneliness that mirrored, in some ways, his own years of solitude. He guided her to his home, keeping his voice calm and steady. Along the way, he tried to reassure her without pressing for answers. She walked slowly, still trembling, relying on his presence to feel safe. By the time they reached the warmth of the ranch house, the sun was dipping below the horizon, painting the sky with colors that seemed almost unreal in their beauty. Tom realized, with a mixture of awe and uncertainty, that this was the beginning of something new, a story that would unfold slowly, gently, and unexpectedly in the quiet life he had built. As he prepared a warm meal and offered her a place to rest, Tom reflected on the strange turn of events. Life on the ranch had been predictable, controlled, and safe, but it had also been lonely. Now, with this stranger in his home, everything he knew was about to change. And deep down, he felt something he hadn't felt in years, a flicker of hope, curiosity, and perhaps even companionship. The night fell, and the ranch, usually quiet except for the soft sounds of animals settling in, carried a new energy. Tom sat by the fire, listening to the woman's quiet breathing as she slept, and understood that his life, once solitary and uneventful, was about to enter uncharted territory. He didn't know what the future held, but for the first time in many years, he felt that life might be richer, fuller, and more meaningful than he had ever imagined. Tom watched the woman sleep through the night, her chest rising and falling slowly, exhausted from whatever journey had brought her to his fence. He had not yet learned her name, nor did he know where she had come from. But something about her vulnerability stirred a sense of responsibility in him that he had not felt in years. For the first time in a long while, he felt needed, as if the quiet rhythm of his ranch life had been interrupted for a reason. Morning came slowly, with soft light spilling across the wooden floor of his home. Tom brewed coffee as quietly as possible, not wanting to wake her, and sat at the table, listening to the distant calls of birds welcoming the day. The ranch looked peaceful under the pale sunlight, yet he could not ignore the strange tension that lingered from the previous evening. The woman was not just a visitor, she was a puzzle he needed to understand. When she finally woke, Tom greeted her gently. "Good morning," he said. "I hope you slept well." She blinked several times, her hair tangled and her face pale. She nodded, hesitating before speaking. "Thank you for helping me," she said softly, her voice quiet but steady. Tom noticed the tremor in her tone, a mix of fear and relief. "I'm glad you're okay," he replied. "You can rest here as long as you need. I'll make you something to eat." He led her to the small kitchen where he laid out bread, eggs, and fresh milk from the ranch. As she ate, Tom watched her carefully. She seemed cautious, unsure of whether to trust this stranger who had appeared so suddenly in her life. He understood that feeling. Over the next few days, Tom did his best to make her comfortable. He built a small bed in a spare room, brought her blankets, and ensured she had warm clothes from his closet. She still did not speak much about her past, only hinting that she had run from a place where she felt unsafe. Tom respected her silence, understanding that trust could not be rushed. Instead, he focused on the simple rhythms of the ranch life, letting her adjust to the safety and predictability of his world. He showed her the basics of ranch work, though he never pressured her. She helped feed the animals, watered the garden, and learned the sounds of the land, the lowing of cows, the neigh of horses, the rustling of grass in the wind. Tom was patient, answering her questions without judgment and letting her move at her own pace. In these small moments, he noticed a spark of life returning to her eyes, a slow building of confidence and trust. Tom named her Leela, after seeing her struggle to smile at the sight of a blooming flower in the garden. The name seemed to suit her, soft, resilient, and full of hidden strength. Leela grew comfortable with her new routines, and soon she began to speak more freely, sharing small stories about her childhood, her love for nature, and her fascination with animals. Each story she told revealed a part of her that had been hidden beneath layers of fear, a life that had been interrupted but was slowly finding its way back. Despite the calm that settled over the ranch, there were moments of tension. Leela would sometimes wake in the middle of the night, startled by sounds in the darkness or haunted by memories she could not fully explain. Tom would sit with her, offering quiet comfort, a steady presence that helped her feel safe. He found himself thinking about her constantly, wondering how someone so fragile yet so determined had ended up alone in the vastness of his land. As the days passed, the two grew closer. Tom was surprised at how much he enjoyed her company. He had grown used to solitude, yet now he looked forward to her laughter, her quiet observations, and even the way she sometimes struggled with new tasks around the ranch. Leela, in turn, began to rely on him not just for safety, but for guidance and support. Their relationship was built on trust, patience, and mutual respect, forming a bond that neither had expected. One afternoon, Tom took Leela to a high hill on the edge of his property, a place he often went to think and watch the sunset. The view was breathtaking, rolling fields, distant mountains, and a sky painted in shades of orange and purple. He pointed out landmarks, told her stories of the land, and shared memories of his childhood on the ranch. Leela listened attentively, her eyes wide with wonder. For the first time since arriving, she seemed truly at peace. "Your land is beautiful," she said softly. "I've never seen anything like it." Tom smiled. "It has its own rhythm," he replied. "It can be harsh, but it can also teach you things you can't learn anywhere else. You just have to be patient and pay attention." Leela nodded, taking in the lesson. She realized that life on the ranch was different from the chaos she had fled. Here, every action had meaning, every choice mattered, and every day offered both challenges and rewards. She began to understand that safety and stability were not things to be taken for granted. They were things that had to be built and maintained, just like the fences and fields of the ranch. As weeks turned into a month, Leela's confidence grew. She learned to ride a horse, mend fences, and tend to the animals with skill and care. Tom watched her progress with pride, noting the way she approached each task with determination and thoughtfulness. In return, she learned about his life, the loneliness he had endured, the routines he had developed, and the deep love he had for his land and animals. Each shared story brought them closer, forming a partnership built on understanding and empathy. However, their peaceful life was not without challenges. One morning, a storm rolled in from the west, bringing wind, rain, and the threat of flooding. Tom and Leela worked together tirelessly, securing the animals, reinforcing the fences, and protecting the house from water damage. It was a test of their abilities and their trust in one another. By the end of the storm, soaked and exhausted, they sat together on the porch, watching the clouds drift away. The experience strengthened their bond, proving that they could rely on each other in times of difficulty. In quieter moments, they would sit by the fire in the evenings, sharing stories and dreams. Tom told Leela about his hopes for the ranch, his regrets, and the lessons he had learned from years of solitude. Leela shared her fears, her aspirations, and her newfound sense of freedom. Each conversation deepened their connection, allowing them to see each other not just as companions, but as kindred spirits who had both endured hardship and found solace in the beauty of the land. Yet, even as their bond grew, Leela remained cautious. She knew that her past had been difficult and unpredictable, and she feared that it might catch up with her. Tom, aware of her hesitation, never pushed her for answers or pressed her to reveal more than she was ready to share. Instead, he offered consistency, reliability, and patience, the quiet assurances that she could trust him and his home. Slowly, she began to believe that not all strangers were threats, and that some people could provide protection, guidance, and friendship without expectation or judgment. One evening, after a long day of work on the ranch, Tom and Leela sat on the porch, watching the stars emerge one by one in the clear night sky. The air was cool, carrying the scent of grass and earth. Leela rested her head on Tom's shoulder, a gesture of trust and comfort that spoke volumes about the connection they had formed. "You've given me a lot," she said quietly, "more than I thought I could have." Tom glanced at her, a gentle smile on his face. "And you've given me something, too," he replied. "A reminder that life can surprise us, that even when we think we're alone, things can change in ways we never expect." It was in these moments, surrounded by the quiet strength of the land and the animals that roamed freely, that both of them realized they were no longer just individuals navigating life separately. They had become partners, bound not by circumstance alone, but by trust, care, and the shared experience of facing uncertainty together. The days continued to pass in rhythm with the seasons. Tom and Leela worked side by side, laughed together, and learned from each other. Their bond grew deeper with each passing day, a steady force against the isolation and fear that had once defined their lives. The ranch, once a place of solitude, had become a place of shared purpose, healing, and quiet joy. And yet, in the back of their minds, both knew that the world beyond the ranch still existed. Challenges and questions about the past lingered, waiting to be addressed. But for now, they focused on the present, the simple beauty of the land, the animals that depended on them, and the newfound friendship and trust that had grown from an unexpected encounter on the fence. Tom realized, with a sense of contentment he had not felt in years, that sometimes life's greatest changes came without warning. A stranger in need, a moment of compassion, and the willingness to open one's life to another person could transform even the quietest existence into a story worth living. The days on the ranch continued with a rhythm that was slowly becoming second nature to both Tom and Leela. Morning chores, feeding the animals, repairing fences, and tending the garden filled their hours. Yet, despite the routine, a subtle tension began to linger in the air. Leela, while growing stronger and more confident in her daily tasks, sometimes paused during their work, staring off into the distance as though she feared something unseen. Tom noticed it immediately. He had lived a long life among the quiet of the land, and he could sense when something was wrong. "Are you all right?" he asked gently one afternoon as she paused mid-step, holding a bucket of water. Leela blinked, shook her head, and forced a small smile. "I'm fine," she said, but the hesitation in her voice told a different story. She set the bucket down and took a deep breath. "It's just, sometimes I remember things I'd rather forget, things that make me feel unsafe again." Tom nodded slowly. He did not press her for details, knowing that trust could not be rushed. He had learned through years of solitude and survival that patience often mattered more than words. "You're safe here," he said firmly. "Nothing is going to hurt you while you're on this land, I promise." Leela seemed to relax slightly, but the fear lingered in her eyes. She had fled a chaotic life, leaving behind people, places, and experiences that had left deep marks. Tom could see that she carried her past quietly, like a shadow that followed her steps. And while the ranch offered freedom, peace, and the safety she had longed for, it could not erase the memories that haunted her. Over the next week, Leela began to open up slowly. She spoke in fragments, small pieces of her past that painted a picture of struggle, fear, and resilience. She had grown up in a busy city, surrounded by noise and crowded streets. She remembered days filled with tension, where she often felt invisible, unheard, and trapped by circumstances beyond her control. Running away had been a desperate choice, a leap into uncertainty with only hope as her guide. Tom listened quietly, offering no judgment, no unsolicited advice. He only offered presence, comfort, and the occasional word of encouragement. It was a simple form of care, but it mattered deeply. Leela began to realize that for the first time in her life, she could speak without fear, without the worry that her words would be used against her. The trust between them grew steadily, like a fragile plant that required sunlight, patience, and careful tending. One morning, as they were repairing a section of the fence near the edge of the property, Leela froze. Her gaze fell on a distant road winding through the hills. "I think someone is coming," she whispered, her voice tight with tension. Tom squinted into the distance and saw a small truck moving slowly along the dirt path. He noticed the way it seemed deliberate, purposeful, and he felt a flicker of unease. "Stay here," he said calmly, gesturing for her to step back. "I'll see who it is." He approached the truck cautiously, his experience with the land giving him an advantage. From the safety of the fence line, he observed the driver. It was a man, unfamiliar to him, looking around as though searching for something or someone. Tom's instincts told him that this visit was no accident, and that Leela's past might have followed her farther than she realized. Returning to her side, he explained, "There's someone on the road looking this way. I don't know who he is, but we need to be careful." Leela's face paled. "They've found me," she whispered. The fear in her eyes was unmistakable, the same fear that had haunted her since she left the city. She clutched Tom's arm, seeking reassurance. He held her hand firmly, silently communicating that she was not alone. For the next few days, Tom and Leela prepared the ranch as best they could. They reinforced the fences, secured the animals in the barns, and made sure the doors and windows of the house were locked and safe. Tom also taught Leela basic ways to stay alert and cautious, how to listen for unusual sounds, how to move quietly, and how to keep watch without panic. It was not about fear. It was about being ready, using the skills the land had taught him for decades. During this time, Leela shared more of her story. She spoke of leaving a life filled with tension and uncertainty, where decisions were not hers to make, and safety was never guaranteed. She admitted that fleeing had been terrifying but necessary. Tom did not comment on the details. He only listened, offering the silent strength that words often could not. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the distant hills, painting the sky in gold and purple, Leela approached Tom with a quiet determination. "I want to face this," she said. "I can't keep running forever. I need to be ready." Tom nodded, understanding the courage it took for her to say this. "You're stronger than you think," he replied. "We'll face this together. Whatever comes, we'll handle it." "You're not alone anymore." The following day, the man from the truck returned, this time stopping closer to the ranch. Tom met him at the fence, his presence calm but firm. The man introduced himself as a messenger from a family member of Leela's, someone trying to find her. Leela's eyes widened with both fear and relief. She had not expected to see someone connected to her past, and yet there was a part of her that hoped for resolution, for answers. Tom and Leela invited the man to speak, and in the careful conversation that followed, the truth emerged. The messenger explained that Leela had been searching for a way to resolve past difficulties legally and safely, and that her safety had been considered a priority by those who genuinely cared for her well-being. Hearing this, Leela's tension eased slightly, though she remained cautious. Over the next few days, the trio worked together to ensure Leela's situation was handled properly. Tom stayed close, providing guidance and support, while Leela began to navigate the path toward resolution. She realized that facing the past did not mean returning to it. It meant understanding it, making choices for herself, and reclaiming her own life. During this period, life on the ranch continued as well. The animals still required care, the fences still needed repair, and the garden still demanded attention. These ordinary tasks, so familiar to Tom, provided Leela with a sense of stability amid uncertainty. She found that strength could grow in quiet moments, in the rhythm of work, and in the patience of someone who cared deeply for her well-being. Evenings became a time of reflection. Tom and Leela would sit by the fire, talking about the day's events, the challenges they faced, and the lessons learned. Leela began to see the land in a new way, not just as a refuge, but as a teacher. Every animal, every tree, every stretch of grass offered lessons in patience, resilience, and understanding. The ranch had become more than a place of safety. It had become a place of growth. One night, as they watched the stars appear in the vast sky above, Leela spoke softly. "I never thought I could feel safe again," she admitted, But here, with you, I think I can start to believe in that again." Tom looked at her, seeing the courage and hope reflected in her eyes. "Safety isn't just about walls and fences," he said. "It's about trust, care, and knowing someone has your back. That's something the land can't teach, but people can, and we'll make sure you have that." The days passed, and Leela's confidence grew. She began to take initiative in caring for the ranch, helping Tom plan for upcoming tasks, and even learning to anticipate challenges before they arose. Their partnership strengthened, built on shared experience, trust, and a growing understanding of each other's strengths. But Tom also understood that Leela's journey was far from complete. Facing her past was only the beginning. There would be moments of doubt, fear, and uncertainty. Yet he believed in her resilience, in the courage she had shown simply by arriving at his ranch and choosing to stay. And he knew that together they could face whatever challenges awaited, just as they had faced storms, repairs, and the unexpected arrival of people from her past. Through it all, the ranch remained a place of grounding, a sanctuary where life continued with purpose, rhythm, and connection. Tom realized that the land, which had once been a solitary refuge for him, had become a space for both of them to heal, grow, and prepare for the future. It was a future neither had expected, yet one that felt increasingly possible with each passing day. By the end of the month, the immediate challenges of Leela's past had begun to settle. She had learned that strength was not just physical but emotional, that trust could be earned, and that life, even after fear and hardship, could be filled with stability, hope, and care. Tom, in turn, discovered a new sense of purpose, a bond that enriched his life beyond what solitude ever had. Together, they had begun to build something meaningful, something resilient, enduring, and real. The peaceful rhythm of the ranch was about to be tested. Weeks of quiet work, shared meals, and long conversations had strengthened the bond between Tom and Leela. They had grown to rely on each other, not just for companionship, but for strength and guidance. Yet the world beyond the hills was never far away. One morning, as the sun rose over the golden fields, a distant sound caught Tom's attention, a low rumble of tires on the dirt road leading toward the ranch. He instinctively paused, his instincts sharpened by decades of life on this land. Leela, who was feeding the chickens, noticed his sudden stillness. "What is it?" she asked, a hint of concern in her voice. Tom pointed toward the road. "Someone's coming," he said calmly, though his eyes narrowed with focus. He did not know who it was, but he knew they had to be cautious. Leela's face paled, the memory of her past fear returning in sharp relief. The truck approached slowly, and as it stopped near the fence, Tom could see two men inside. They were strangers, their faces unfamiliar, but their posture suggested purpose. Tom's instincts told him immediately that this visit was not casual. He moved toward the gate, signaling Leela to stay behind, and called out in a firm, steady voice, "Can I help you?" The men stepped out cautiously. One of them spoke first, introducing himself as someone seeking Leela. He claimed he came on behalf of people connected to her past, insisting that he meant no harm. Tom listened carefully, observing every detail, the tone of his voice, the way he moved, the way his companion glanced around. Something about the situation did not feel right. Leela appeared from behind the house, hesitant but determined. "I'll talk to them," she said softly, stepping toward the men. Tom caught her hand for a brief moment. "Be careful," he murmured, giving her a reassuring squeeze. As the conversation unfolded, it became clear that these men were not here with good intentions. Their questions were probing, insistent, and invasive. They wanted information, answers, and access to Leela's life, things she was not willing to give. Her fear was evident, but so was her courage. She refused to let them intimidate her, standing tall despite the tension that filled the air. Tom watched closely, ready to intervene if necessary. Years of experience on the ranch had taught him how to assess danger, how to respond calmly, and how to protect what mattered most. He stepped forward when one of the men tried to approach Leela too closely. "That's far enough," he said firmly. His voice carried authority, shaped by years of solitude and self-reliance. The men paused, taken aback by his confidence. Leela took a deep breath, speaking with steady resolve. "You have no right to be here," she said. "I am safe, I am protected. And I will not be forced to answer your questions." The firmness in her voice surprised even herself, but it was bolstered by the presence of Tom, who had silently stood by her side throughout her life on the ranch. The standoff lasted for several tense minutes. The men, realizing that their approach was futile, exchanged glances and muttered under their breath. Tom remained vigilant, ensuring that neither of them made sudden moves. Leela's heart raced, but she drew strength from the land, the animals, and the man who had become her protector. Finally, the men stepped back. "We'll leave for now," one of them said, their voices low, tinged with frustration. "But we'll be back." Without another word, they returned to their truck and drove away along the dirt road, leaving a cloud of dust behind them. Tom watched until the vehicle disappeared over the hill, then turned to Leela with a calm expression. "You're safe now," he said gently. "They won't get to you here." Leela exhaled slowly, feeling the tension drain from her body. Tears welled in her eyes, not from fear, but from the relief of knowing she was truly protected. She looked at Tom, gratitude and trust shining in her gaze. "Thank you," she whispered. For the next few days, they worked tirelessly to reinforce the ranch's security. Tom repaired weak sections of the fence, ensured the barns were secure, and taught Leela strategies for staying alert without living in fear. Each task, though physically demanding, brought them closer together, strengthening their bond and reaffirming their shared determination. During this time, Leela began to confront the emotional weight of the encounter. She realized that she had grown stronger, not just physically but mentally and emotionally. She could face fear, stand her ground, and rely on someone she trusted completely. Tom had taught her that strength did not mean acting alone. It meant knowing when to ask for help, when to be patient, and when to stand firm. One afternoon, as they worked on mending a particularly broken section of the fence, Leela paused to look at the distant hills. "I never imagined I could feel safe like this," she said softly. "I thought I would always be running, always afraid, but here with you I feel strong, I feel like I belong somewhere." Tom smiled, handing her a hammer to secure a loose board. "The land has a way of teaching you that," he said. "It shows you that hard work, patience, and trust can make a place not just a home but a refuge. You've earned that, Leela." The storm that had been brewing over the hills for weeks finally arrived, bringing with it wind, rain, and the threat of flooding. The ranch was put to the ultimate test. Together, Tom and Leela worked from dawn to dusk, securing animals, reinforcing structures, and protecting the fields from damage. The rain lashed against the roof and windows, and the wind bent the trees, but neither of them faltered. Their partnership, forged through shared work and trust, proved stronger than any storm. That night, as they sat by the fire, exhausted and soaked, Leela spoke with a quiet sense of wonder. "We did it," she said. "We kept the ranch safe, together." Tom nodded, his eyes reflecting the firelight. "We can handle whatever comes," he said. "The world can be unpredictable, but here we have each other and this land. That's enough to face anything." In the days that followed, life slowly returned to a more manageable rhythm. The men who had come seeking Leela did not return immediately, giving both of them a sense of temporary relief. Leela began to focus more on the tasks of daily life, feeding the animals, tending the garden, and learning more about the land. Tom continued to guide her, teaching skills that would serve her well, not just on the ranch, but in life beyond it. During this period, Leela reflected on her journey. She had come to the ranch scared, alone, and uncertain. She had faced fear, danger, and the shadows of her past. Yet through it all, she had discovered inner strength, resilience, and the value of trust. Tom had been her guide, protector, and companion, showing her that life could be rebuilt, step by step, with patience and care. One evening, as the sun set behind the hills, painting the sky with shades of pink and gold, Leela and Tom sat on the porch, watching the horizon. The ranch, once a place of isolation and routine, had become a place of growth, courage, and shared purpose. The animals moved quietly in the fields, the wind rustled the grass, and the land seemed to breathe with a sense of calm and stability. "I never thought life could feel this balanced," Leela said softly. "I've faced so much, yet here I feel like I can finally move forward." Tom reached out and took her hand. "You faced the storm both inside and out," he said, "and you came through stronger. That's something to carry with you always." The events of the past weeks had transformed them both. Tom, who had once lived in solitude, learned the strength of partnership and the joy of shared purpose. Leela, who had fled fear and uncertainty, learned resilience, trust, and the courage to face challenges head-on. The ranch, a place of routine and work, had become a sanctuary where life, in all its complexity, could be met with confidence, patience, and hope. As night fell over the land, stars emerging one by one in the vast sky, Leela felt a sense of peace she had never known. The world beyond the ranch still existed, with its dangers and uncertainties, but for the first time she felt equipped to face it. And beside her, steady and reassuring, was Tom, a man who had shown her that even in unexpected moments, life could offer protection, friendship, and the possibility of a new beginning. They sat together long into the night, talking quietly, planning for the days ahead, and sharing the silence of a land that had witnessed both hardship and healing. And as the ranch settled into calm, with the animals resting and the wind whispering through the fields, both understood that the true strength of the place lay not just in its fences and barns, but in the trust, courage, and bond that had been forged between them. For Leela, the confrontation had been a turning point. She realized that courage was not the absence of fear, but the willingness to face it with support and clarity. For Tom, it was a reminder that even a life built on solitude could be enriched by connection, trust, and shared responsibility. Together, they had weathered both literal and metaphorical storms, and they knew that whatever challenges came next, they would meet them with strength, unity, and a sense of hope that could not be shaken. The days on the ranch settled into a gentle rhythm after the confrontation. Tom and Leela had faced the storm together, both literal and emotional, and the experience had strengthened the bond between them. The tension of uncertainty that had once hung over Leela's life had begun to fade, replaced by a quiet confidence she had never known. She moved through the ranch with purpose, feeding the animals, tending the garden, and repairing fences, her hands steady and her mind calm. For Tom, each glance at her growing independence brought a sense of pride and relief. Life on the ranch had always been predictable in its work and demands, but now, with Leela as a part of it, each day held a renewed sense of purpose. They worked side by side, sharing duties, exchanging small jokes, and learning from each other's habits. Leela had discovered that her strength went beyond endurance. She had learned to think ahead, solve problems, and care for both the land and the animals in a way that was thoughtful and deliberate. Tom watched her with quiet admiration, knowing she had grown into someone capable of facing challenges with both courage and compassion. The ranch, too, seemed to reflect the change. The fences stood sturdier than ever, the animals healthy and content, and the garden flourishing with life. Even the wind seemed gentler, as though the land itself recognized the new chapter unfolding within it. For Leela, every sunrise brought a sense of calm and belonging, and every sunset offered a chance to reflect on how far she had come since the day she appeared on Tom's fence. One morning, as they were moving feed to the barn, Leela paused and looked out over the fields. "I can't believe this is my life now," she said softly. "I used to live in fear all the time. Now I feel like I have a future I can control. It's more than I ever dreamed of." Tom nodded, carrying a sack of grain with steady hands. "It's not easy to get here," he said. "You've worked hard for every bit of peace and confidence you have. And it's not just about safety or work. It's about knowing you belong somewhere and have people who care about you." Leela smiled, a quiet, genuine smile that reached her eyes. "I belong here," she said. "With you, with the ranch, it feels right." The bond between them was no longer just one of companionship. It had grown into a partnership rooted in trust, respect, and shared experience. Tom realized that his years of solitude had prepared him for this moment. He had learned patience, resilience, and self-reliance, all qualities that allowed him to support Leela fully. And in return, Leela had brought a sense of hope and renewal to his life, reminding him that even in quiet, isolated places, human connection could flourish. As the weeks turned into months, Leela's confidence continued to grow. She learned to ride the horses with skill and ease, guide the cattle through the pastures, and anticipate changes in the weather. Tom guided her with gentle instruction, never rushing, always encouraging. She discovered joy in the simple acts of daily life, the feel of hay beneath her fingers, the rhythm of a horse's gait, the quiet satisfaction of a well-tended garden. Each day brought small victories, and each victory built her sense of self and independence. The land had become more than just a place of safety. It had become a teacher. Leela realized that strength was not only about standing firm in the face of fear, but also about patience, understanding, and adaptability. She learned to read the clouds for signs of rain, notice changes in the animals' behavior, and even sense the subtle shifts in the wind that signaled an approaching storm. Life on the ranch was demanding, yes, but it was honest, grounding, and deeply rewarding. Evenings were their favorite time. After a day of hard work, Tom and Leela would sit on the porch, watching the sun dip behind the hills and listening to the gentle sounds of the land. The air was filled with the scent of earth and grass, the distant calls of birds settling for the night, and the soft rustle of leaves in the breeze. They would share quiet conversation, reflecting on the day's work, telling stories, or simply enjoying the calm. In these moments, both felt a sense of peace that had eluded them for so long. One evening, as the stars began to appear, Leela spoke softly. "I never thought life could feel this full," she said. "I used to think happiness was something I could only imagine. But now I feel it in simple things, the land, the animals, even just sitting here with you." Tom looked at her, his eyes reflecting the firelight and the deep affection he felt. "Happiness isn't always about big events," he said. "Sometimes it's quiet, steady, and small. And it grows over time with care, patience, and trust. That's what we've built here together." Their relationship had grown without force or rush, built instead on respect, shared work, and mutual support. They did not need grand declarations or dramatic gestures. The strength of their bond was in the everyday moments, the small acts of kindness, and the quiet understanding that they could rely on each other. Leela had found safety and trust, while Tom had discovered companionship, hope, and the renewal of a life once lived in solitude. As spring arrived on the ranch, the land transformed. Wildflowers bloomed across the pastures, the trees turned green, and the animals flourished under their care. The sight of the vibrant landscape brought joy to both Tom and Leela, a reminder that life, like the land, could grow and heal with attention and care. Each sunrise felt like a promise, each sunset a reward for their perseverance and dedication. One day, while walking along the edge of the property, Leela paused to take in the view. "It's beautiful here," she said. "I never realized how much life could feel full. I thought running was the only way to survive, but here I've learned to live." Tom nodded. "Living isn't always easy, but it's worth it," he said, "and it's even better when you don't have to do it alone." Leela smiled, feeling a sense of completeness she had never known. She understood now that life was not about escaping fear, but about facing it with courage and finding strength in the right place and with the right people. The ranch had offered her that space, and Tom had been her guide, protector, and friend through it all. Over the following months, they continued to strengthen the ranch and their bond. They repaired old barns, planted new crops, and expanded the garden. Leela took the lead on projects that required careful attention, while Tom offered guidance and wisdom. The land became a canvas for their efforts, reflecting the harmony they had cultivated between themselves and the world around them. The animals, too, flourished under their care. The horses were healthy and strong, moving freely across the pastures. The cattle grew robust, and the chickens produced more eggs than ever. Leela took pride in her work, understanding that her efforts had a direct impact on the life of the ranch. Tom watched her with pride, seeing in her the growth of someone who had once been lost and frightened, now confident and capable. One evening, as the sun set behind the distant hills, Tom and Leela stood together, surveying the land. "We've built something special here," Leela said, her voice full of wonder. "Not just a ranch, but a life, a home." Tom smiled, placing a hand on her shoulder. "It's more than a home," he said. "It's a life we've created together, and it's just the beginning." They stood in silence for a moment, feeling the wind on their faces and the warmth of the fading sunlight. The ranch, once a place of solitude and routine, had become a sanctuary of hope, resilience, and shared purpose. Both understood that the future held challenges, as life always did, but they also knew that together they could face anything. As the stars emerged in the night sky, Leela and Tom returned to the house. The fire burned softly in the hearth, casting a warm glow across the room. They spoke quietly about plans for the next day, repairs to the fence, tending the garden, caring for the animals. But beneath the practical conversation was a deeper understanding. They had survived fear, uncertainty, and challenge. They had built trust, courage, and companionship, and they had found a home not just in the land, but in each other. The ranch, with its rolling fields, sturdy fences, and thriving animals, stood as a symbol of what they had accomplished. It was a place of safety, growth, and connection, a reflection of their efforts, their care, and their shared journey. Leela had learned that life could be rebuilt, one careful step at a time, and Tom had learned that even a life shaped by solitude could flourish with companionship and trust. As the night deepened, they sat together on the porch, listening to the quiet of the land. The soft sounds of animals resting, the rustling of the wind through the grass, and the distant call of a night bird filled the air. In that moment, Leela felt a profound sense of peace, knowing that she had found safety, belonging, and a chance to live fully. Tom glanced at her, seeing the calm strength in her eyes, and felt a deep sense of fulfillment. Life had brought unexpected challenges, but it had also brought connection, trust, and the joy of shared purpose. Together, they had created something enduring, a life of care, resilience, and quiet happiness. And as the stars shone above the ranch, Tom and Leela sat side by side, knowing that they had faced the past, embraced the present, and built a future full of promise. The journey had been long, difficult, and sometimes uncertain, but it had led them to a place of hope, companionship, and true belonging. For Leela, the ranch was no longer just a refuge. It was a home, a symbol of her courage, and a testament to the strength she had found within herself. For Tom, it was a reminder that even in solitude, life could surprise you, offering connection, purpose, and the chance to build something meaningful with another person.